A fairly dry and bright start to the day. Clear skies overnight mean temperatures could fall down close to zero, but it should be a fairly mild start for most of us first thing on Tuesday, but probably quite dull actually for the large proportion of England and Wales, with the best of any brighter weather across more northwestern areas. There's still a risk of some low cloud across the far northern parts of the Highlands, the Northern Isles as well, but western parts of the Highlands as well as the Western Isles will see plenty of sunshine. That includes Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, West Wales, southwest England too, but the further south we go, the stronger the breeze will be. So it'll be another easterly breeze through Thursday, bringing a slightly fresher feel, but still going to feel warm in the sunshine once it does develop. And much of that cloud should break up across central areas, though across the east coast, it'll likely linger through much of the day. Probably a bit of a cloudier day for eastern areas, and as a result, a cooler day for northeastern areas of England, parts of eastern Scotland too, but still another warm feeling day across the south and west of England in particular. Then into Thursday evening, it's a rinse and repeat situation. That cloud will return back in from the North Sea, pulling into many central and eastern areas. And then we see a risk of showers, some quite heavy, potentially thundery showers developing for many southern areas of England and Wales from Friday all the way through to Sunday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems in West Dunbartonshire to the east of Dunbarton. The A82, the Stirling Road, remains shut northbound at the scene of an accident. On the M1 in South Yorkshire, the two inside lanes are free, closed southbound at junction 33, the Sheffield exit, where a lorry's broken down. On Merseyside, on the M57 southbound, a lane's closed from junction 2 to 1 between Prescott and the M62, following a breakdown. And to the north of Swansea, on the M4 westbound, the motorway partly blocked junction 46 to 47 past the scene of an accident in the Penflegare interchange. And trains are suspended between Barton and Humber and Cleethorpes following a faulty train, and buses are still in trains in Gunners Lake and Cowstock for engineering works. And West Midlands just telling us they can't run between Lichfield, Trent Valley and Wild Green due to a points failure at Four Oaks. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You could be the next Great British Giveaway winner with a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash in your bank account. Imagine getting the winning phone call for that.
I've got some really good news for you. You've won £30,000.
£30,000 cash? Oh my God, I'm going to cry. That's brilliant news.
For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Coming up tonight, we've seen another wave of explosions when it comes to Hezbollah. This time, they're walkie-talkies. We'll take a look at that. Also, Keir Starmer. Quite frankly, everyone, I think we're all in the wrong job. If we were him, we'd been able to have bagged £100,000 worth of freebies. What's going on? Do the Labour Party not understand optics? Why isn't Sue Gray advising them? She now apparently even earns more than the Prime Minister. Goodness gracious me, what a mess. Also, when it comes to abortion, where are you on buffer zones? They will soon come into play. Do you support that or not? Also, the amount of paedophiles avoiding jail, it repulses me. And I know it will do many of you too. So now, is it time for mandatory jail sentences for these people? And I would go a step further, chemical castration too. All that and more, but first, the 6 o'clock news headlines.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines just after 6 o'clock. First, to the Middle East, where another wave of explosions have wounded hundreds of people in Beirut. It's understood that handheld radios have been targeted in the latest attacks in Lebanon rather than pagers. It comes as Hezbollah has launched rockets at Israel, marking the first cross-border attack since explosions rocked Lebanon. The terrorist group have accused Israel of what's believed to have been a remote attack targeting handheld communication devices. The Israeli Defense Forces say they did strike a Hezbollah target last night. Meanwhile, the Israeli army chief has said, "We have many capabilities we have not yet activated." 12 people, including 2 children, were killed in the blasts yesterday, and nearly 3,000 remain in hospital. 19 Iranian Revolutionary Guards were also killed in Syria, according to reports on Saudi television. Development Minister Annalise Dodds says the UK will be supporting civilians impacted in the explosions.
Like many others, I woke up this morning to the news and reports of developments in Lebanon, and this clearly is an awful situation. I'm very concerned to hear about the reports of civilian casualties. Clearly, I don't know all of the details of this. As I say, we woke up to this news, but the UK will be working with, particularly with our humanitarian partners in the region.
Now back in the UK, drivers from the ASLEF union have overwhelmingly backed a new pay deal from the Department for Transport, ending a dispute that began in 2022. The deal promises drivers a 15% pay rise over 3 years, with almost 97% of the union's 20,000 members voting in favour. Since July 2022, train drivers have walked out for 18 days, crippling services across England. But with the new agreement, passengers can look forward to some long-awaited stability on the rails. Now, in other news, a public inquiry into the crimes of convicted child serial killer nurse Lucy Letby is continuing today. The investigation is scrutinising how Letby, now serving 15 life sentences, was able to murder 7 babies and injure 7 more while she worked at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Yesterday, the mother of child D told the inquiry having CCTV in her daughter's hospital nursery room could have prevented her murder. The inquiry is now looking into whether all neonatal units in England should install CCTV. Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper is in Liverpool for us, where the inquiry is taking place.
This morning we are expecting to continue with evidence from parents. We're expecting to hear from the mother of child E and child F, twin boys who were both attacked by Letby. Child E was murdered via an injection of air, and child F, it was an attempted murder charge, poisoning with insulin. He did survive. Now, this morning we're unable to go into Liverpool Town Hall, into the inquiry itself, partially because of concerns around anonymity, but also, as I'm sure our viewers can understand, it must be incredibly difficult for those parents to stand up and to share the impacts that this has had on them and the lives of their wider families.
Meanwhile, buffer zones will come into force around abortion clinics in England and Wales from the 31st of October. It will make it illegal to protest or hand out anti-abortion leaflets within an 150-metre radius or obstruct anyone using or working at an abortion clinic. Those convicted of breaking the new law will face an unlimited fine. A spokesperson for Right to Life UK said the zones will mean vital practical support provided, which helps to provide a genuine choice and offers help to women who may be undergoing coercion, will be removed. Inflation remained above the 2% target, unchanged at 2.2% last month, with new data out today. Prices in hospitality, holidays and hotels, possibly boosted by the final leg of Taylor Swift's UK tour, are driving inflation, with inflation in the services sector up to 5.6% in August. Treasury Chief Darren Jones says years of sky-high inflation continues to put a strain on British families, despite the slower rise. He added the government is determined to fix the foundation of the economy to ease the pressure on households. Experts believe the figures point to the Bank of England keeping interest rates at 5% tomorrow. And finally, TGI Fridays UK operator has entered administration as the company scrambles to sell its 87 restaurants worldwide. The chain's parent company hopes to complete the sale by the end of September, potentially saving thousands of jobs. However, it's not clear if a buyer will be found, and it may not be enough to cover the company's debts. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Michelle.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you ever so much for that. My name's Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel, Peter Hitchens, the columnist at The Mail on Sunday, and Aaron Bastani, the co-founder of Novara Media. Good evening, gents, to both of you. You're very welcome tonight. As are each and every single one of you at home, what's on your mind tonight? Get in touch all the usual ways. Email gbviews@gbnews.com. You can tweet or X me, or of course you can go to the website gbnews.com/yoursay. But look, of course, there has been lots going on today. I've been glued to this story. I know that many of you have as well. I'm speaking, of course, about the wave of explosions that we saw. We saw this all start yesterday, didn't we, with the the pagers exploding. Well, today that story's moved on. This time, apparently, walkie-talkies. Let's cross live to GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. Good evening to you, Mark. Bring us up to speed with the latest.
Good evening to you, Michelle. It is, yes, absolutely. This is an incredible development, day 2 of this, and a second wave of these explosions sweeping across parts of Lebanon, the Lebanese capital, Beirut, and other areas of particularly southern Lebanon that have been affected by multiple explosions, targeting not the pagers that were targeted yesterday, with thousands of them detonating, resulting in many thousands, of course, of casualties as a result of that. But this time, we're told, targeting these sort of handheld devices, walkie-talkie radios, but not just limited to walkie-talkie. The Hezbollah communication system must be in absolute meltdown at the moment. They will not know what devices they can actually turn to communicate with each other. And that very significant news that has just broken in the last hour, with the Israeli Defense Minister saying that Israel has entered a new phase of this war, shifting focus away from the war in Gaza to the north of the country, where, you know, much of the focus, of course, has been on, understandably, what has been happening in Gaza over the last 11, almost 12 months. But in the north, there has been a very significant war that has been raging across that border from southern Lebanon into northern Israel, with every single day, multiple times a day, the Hezbollah terrorist group firing rockets, missiles, and launching drones towards northern Israel. 8,000, in fact, more than 8,000 since the start of this war, from their point of view, on October the 8th, after the terrorist attacks in Israel on the 7th of October. And that's resulted in tens of thousands, up to 70,000 people from northern Israel who've been displaced. In fact, when I was across in Israel covering the aftermath of the attacks there on the 7th of October. Staying in the hotel with me were dozens of people from northern Israel who had been relocated there because of the attacks that were being carried out by Hezbollah. So it's clear now that the Israeli Defense Forces have decided that the next phase of that operation is to take on Hezbollah in the north to secure the return of its citizens to these northern communities and to deal with this very significant threat from Hezbollah. But Michelle, in doing that, in taking on Hezbollah, they are taking on a very significant adversary. Of course, at the moment, while all of these communications devices have been compromised, while many of Hezbollah's fighters have been affected, injured, some killed in these explosions, it is a very powerful organisation in comparison to the Hamas terrorist group. They have many thousands of missiles that are capable of journeying much further into Israel, into its major population centres, and are much more accurate in their targeting as well. So we could be in for a very difficult few weeks and months ahead as this next phase of the war, as it's been described by the Israeli Defense Forces, begins.
Our Home and Security Editor, thank you for that. Aaron Bastani, goodness me, what do you make to all this?
Well, I think this is pretty much a dictionary definition of terrorism. We're looking at IEDs, improvised explosive devices, across the entirety of Lebanese civil society. Somebody could say, well, they're being targeted exclusively at Hezbollah targets, but we know that the victims of this are not purely people with Hezbollah. There are healthcare workers, 2 children have died, as was just mentioned by your colleague. And I think when you have thousands of IEDs going off across a country, where you have civilians being maimed and killed, that to me, as I've said, is the dictionary definition of terrorism. Now, some of your viewers and listeners might agree, some might disagree. What I would implore them to think about, however, is why is this happening? And I think that shift from Gaza to the West Bank, but more importantly, the Lebanese border, is because Netanyahu needs to stay in power and subsequently needs to shift the political focus from a failing war to a new front. And that is what is happening here. This is a political choice being made by Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, in order to stay in power rather than to keep his people safe.
The Israeli army chief, one of them, says, Peter, quite recently, in the last hour or so, we've got many capabilities that we have not yet activated.
Yes,
Do you make to it all?
But what are they for? I don't want to enter a semantic argument with Aaron about what we call it, but I think that the thing which I struggle to understand is what on earth the Israeli government hopes to achieve by this behaviour. What Netanyahu used to be clever at, until about a year ago, was playing off Iran so that, and making out that Iran and therefore its client Hezbollah was his main enemy, while in general terms he grew closer and closer to Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Arab world, who also hate Iran. And this was actually quite a clever strategy, and for the most part it meant that despite his supposedly extremely tough nature, Netanyahu didn't engage in very much in the way of war. But since last October he seems to have completely abandoned that and to be seeking violence. And I have to say the explanation that he's doing it to stay in power does more and more seem to me to be the only really acceptable one, because none of this makes sense. If you want, Israel can't, I don't think, win a war simultaneously against Hamas and against Hezbollah and against the growing hostility of much of the Arab world over what's going on in Gaza and the continuing bombardment of civilians there. Just can't do it. So there's no achievement there. The war which he seems to be fighting is one with his own political class and to try and remain in power. And I can't see what advantage this has for anybody. I'm also very dubious about all this sort of use of clever. weapons. The use of drones by the West in the Middle East has not been very much focused on, but in fact it really isn't particularly morally scrupulous to kill people out of the blue from the air, and it does begin to seem that the moral advantage which we like to claim over organisations which have always engaged in terror is growing thin the more we do this. And I get what is the military political purpose of it?
Well, million-dollar question. One of my viewers has got in touch, Aaron, and said it's disgusting, basically, that Aaron Bastani calls this terrorism. This viewer asks, why do, her words, the far left have a problem with the Jews fighting back?
Well, if she thinks it's disgusting that I have a problem with a 10-year-old girl being killed, then we disagree. We live in a free country and people are welcome to disagree with one another. This is terrorism because we're talking about thousands, not 1, 2, 5, 10, thousands of simultaneous explosions across a country. There has never been anything like that, as far as I understand. And like I say, these are IEDs. The videos that we've seen, it broadly looks like a shotgun. So it's not like a major explosion with Semtex, but it's a pretty significant small explosion. So I would use that word, and I use that word pointedly, but also with great thought. I'm not just throwing that term around. This is unprecedented. And by the way, if Russia pursues a similar course of action in the future, what do you think our government and the Americans will call it? They will call it terrorism, and they will be right.
I know, but the pushback will come, so people will watch this, and the people that have the view that you're wrong to call it terrorism, I know what those people will be saying. Those people will be saying, how come you call this act almost instantaneously terrorism, but when October the 7th happened, the same collective of people that viewer would regard as the so-called far left were really reluctant to call those kind of horrendous, atrocious acts terrorism.
Well, on the day I think I was even here with Peter, or maybe the day after, I called it terrorism. It was these were war crimes, and that's been detailed by the International Criminal Courts. Those were war crimes, as are, by the way, what we're seeing right now. I don't know about this because we haven't got enough data, by the way. That's really important to say. We don't know what products are exploding. There's also claims with regards to solar panels. We don't know who brought them there, and we don't know who the final users are. At the moment, we're hearing it's just Hezbollah fighters, but then we're hearing also healthcare workers. We're hearing that there are secondary markets with people buying devices which are blowing up.
Yes, can I also reply to your contributor talking about Israel fighting back? Israel does have an absolute right to fight back when attacked, but that doesn't mean there's no limit on what it can do. And if it is, as it has always said, it is concerned with the purity of arms and with having higher ethical standards than its enemies and neighbours, then it has to think quite carefully about the things which it does and how it does them. I think that ever since the bombardment of Gaza began, Israel has been putting itself in the wrong in a very serious way. I know a lot of... I am myself a defender of Israel of many decades, and I've not ceased to be one, but this doesn't mean that I'm incapable of saying some things that Israel does are stupid and wrong. And much of what's been going on since last October has been stupid and wrong and misplaced, not least because it neglects the very important problem, which is that Israel depends for its existence ultimately upon the political and military support of the major Western democracies, and if it loses that, it has nothing. And what it's doing at the moment is having a very, very powerful effect on the large parts of the populations of Western countries who previously were supporters of Israel and are now having second thoughts. And I can't believe that this goes on and on and on without more criticism.
Well, another one of my viewers, Ross, he's just got in touch and said, please can you remind your guests, it was not that long ago that there was a rocket attack, a Hezbollah rocket attack into Israel, into a children's playground, which killed multiple children.
Well, who is not condemning that?
That was terrorism as well, yeah.
Who is not condemning that?
It's also terrorism.
If you condemn that, then you have to consider what is it. I say I'm not joining in Aaron in calling this terrorism as such. But if you condemn that, then you surely must examine the actions of Israel using the same moral compass as you used to say that was terrorism. Can you really say that these sort of attacks fall within the legitimate laws of war. I think there's some serious doubt. I don't know enough about this particular attack. My absolute conviction, however, is that the bombardment of Gaza, where there is a large civilian population, is completely outside the laws of war and should not continue. And everybody of conscience, whatever they think about Israel, should be against it. And I urge people to be against it. But that's, on this matter, my mind is less made up than Aaron's. But if you don't like the blowing up of innocent people, then you don't like it wherever it happens.
Honestly, you can see it for yourselves on Twitter. So many people are getting in touch about this. There's so much anger on this hot. It's a very emotional topic, especially when innocent children will always be innocent, getting killed in this way. One of my viewers has just said, this is essentially, I'm paraphrasing a bit, but essentially great. They're saying, bravo, Israel, you're eradicating the evil. This is not terrorism. They say it's payback. And they're asking questions about why would children have things like pagers. I mean, I've got to say, a child, I don't know if you've got children, but if you've got a device, a telephone or anything like that, and it makes a strange noise, children do actually go tearing over to those devices. Oh, Mummy, Daddy, this is ringing. I mean, so I'm not really sure I should.
Let me throw a question back to that person. If this was such a justified, legitimate act, why didn't the Israelis tell the Americans and the British about it beforehand? If it was so virtuous and necessary.
And why have they not?
Because
they didn't. Responsibility for it. That's the bit that I don't understand. If they're so proud of what they're doing, why aren't they coming out and saying, yes, this is us, and we stand by that, and we're doing it for this reason? That's the bit that I don't get as a layperson.
They didn't do that because they know Washington and London would say, this is deeply unwise, and we absolutely do not back you. And by the way, when Iran sent hundreds of ballistic missiles, loitering munitions, drones heading towards Israel, it was the Royal Air Force and the United States Air Force which shot them down alongside the Jordanians. So when we're needed, of course, we get the call, but when something like this is happening, the IDF says nothing. I don't think that's particularly fair. Maybe that person who called in disagrees.
Honestly, well, it's not just person, it's plural. There are so many people getting in touch with me right now, very angry, saying that it's absolutely sickening calling these things terrorism. This is basically Israel defending themselves. You're telling me that about this constant sea of rockets that constantly get fired into Israel, and there is a real fury about this issue coming in on it's everywhere, quite frankly. You can see it. It's all over Twitter. It's all over email. And many of you at home are saying that this is essentially justified and payback. I can tell you now, when I saw this unfolding yesterday, the first thing that I did is push my telephone away from me. That's the first thing I did, almost like a subconscious act. I'd never, ever in my life, ever even considered the prospect of a piece of electronic hardware in the vicinity of me just randomly, deliberately exploding. And my worry was, is this going to kind of inspire other terrorist organisations?
Who knows? Imagine it would be quite difficult to do, but my point of view is if you eliminated the word terrorism from this discussion and simply used the term the killing of civilians by a stealthy method, how many people actually prove that whoever does it? The judgment that you must make usually on these things is how would you react if somebody else did it to you? And if you have one view if you do it to somebody else and another view if somebody does it to you, then you're kidding yourself, really. Again, if you want to conduct warfare, most of us think that warfare should really be between trained soldiers in situations of declared battle. We absolutely are terrified of, and if we're not, we should be, of war spilling over into civilian life and the destruction of homes, the driving of people from their homes, the killing of innocent civilians. I'm sure it is. But
if Israeli children what do you think Israel should do? Just sit there?
Not kill other children, I think, would be one first thing I would say, because if you're against killing children, you're against killing children absolutely, as I am. You're not against killing one lot of children, you're against killing everybody's children. I'm not a pacifist. I believe that countries should be able to wage war. There are very strong limits within which they should do it. But there are laws of war, and people should keep within them. And I think with any form of war, which carelessly but inevitably ostensibly targets civilians is something which should be avoided and actually condemned. And I do not think that the Israeli government is currently in the hands of people who have any sort of intelligent idea of how to proceed. And I'm very worried by it for the sake of Israel. And if people who are inundating your inbox are concerned about the state of Israel, they should ask themselves, how long can Israel survive if it loses the support of the populations of the Western democracies? And the answer is not very long. It survives very heavily, militarily, economically and diplomatically, because it continues to have that backing. Once it's lost, it's very lonely and it's very small.
Well, I can tell you there is a lot of people getting in touch and defending this action, saying that Israel absolutely has the right to defend themselves. Paul says you can all call it terrorism if you like, but ultimately, shouldn't terrorists have to look over their shoulder from other terrorists? So Hezbollah then essentially, in your view, getting what they deserve. I mean, really a huge response coming into this.
What do people who say this? I say I won't engage in the use of the word terrorism. Simply blots out any sense in this discussion. What do people who take this view say, for instance, about the targeted assassination of people whom Israel or the United States regards as enemies in the Middle East by drone? What do they think about it? Do they think this is legitimate action?
Very briefly.
If the Iranians did it to us, what would they think of it?
Jeremy, he's got in touch and he's asking, and I need to be brief because I was supposed to have been on a break by now, but he's saying, well, what do your panel actually think is a proportionate response then to the thousands of rockets that are fired into Israel each and every single day?
Well, the proportionate response is that basically none of them get through. Iron Dome is an exceptionally effective technology at stopping that. The big problem for Israel is not rockets landing in Israel. As Peter said, the big problem is public opinion in this country, in the United States, turning away from them. Extraordinary polling, YouGov, 66% of people in this country now have an unfavourable view of Israel. In the long term, that's a much bigger problem.
It's disastrous.
Than whether or not, your viewers today disagree with Peter or I. That's a much bigger problem.
I thought, Michelle, I was a really strong and rather fierce supporter of Israel until last October. And then I suddenly found that huge numbers of people I'd never heard of before were far more militant than I. And there's this strange attitude among some people who think of themselves as conservative and pro-Israel in this country that ultra-militancy is somehow the answer to a problem which has absolutely not shown any signs of being solved since 1948. I don't agree. And I used to think I was as hard a line as you got. I think this is very foolish. And I think that what Aaron has just said about the poll gives you a very strong example of that. This is particularly serious in the United States, which has been absolute bedrock, iron wall supporter of the Israeli state for decades. And I think that support is now fading. And if there isn't the political support there, people perhaps don't realise just how vital American military and diplomatic support is for Israel all the time.
People in my inbox are asking, why do people bring up international law when it comes to the actions of Israel, but seem to turn a blind eye?
Well, I didn't bring up international law. I haven't brought it up once.
Malcolm has said, Michelle, why is everyone calling all of these people civilians? They are Hezbollah members and they are designated terrorists. Other people getting in touch saying, how are you all so sure that this was Israel? Apparently nobody has yet claimed.
I think we can be sure it's Israel. I don't think anyone said they're all civilians. I think what Aaron said is that some of them are civilians and some of them are children. So that is just a case. But no one's, I think, saying they're all civilians.
Well, I can. But
how wide, if you want to say that you can legitimately kill people by this method, how wide do you draw your net?
Well, there you go. You can ponder that question. How wide is your net? What do you think to the conversations that we're having? You've got very strong opinions on it at home. Get in touch with me and let me know. There's lots going on in this country that I need to talk to you about for the rest of the programme. Abortion centres, do they need buffer zones? Keir Starmer, his new nickname, Free Gear Kia. Goodness gracious me, what's going on? We're in the wrong job, people. I'll see you in 2.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
An army veteran has become the world's most tattooed woman after a 10-year journey to ink 99.98% of her body. I mean, that's really nearly everywhere. But I wonder, I mean, yes, she is unusual, and you'd know her if you met her, frankly, wouldn't you? But are tattoos acceptable they're becoming more and more acceptable just amongst all of us, aren't they? But what about in the workplace?
99.98% of her body tattooed. Do you think this would affect the way that she is received at work?
I do affect it would how she is seen at work, just purely because tattoos are still so stigmatised in the workplace. In today's rapidly evolving society, the traditional standards of what is socially acceptable are being redefined. Facial tattoos, full body tattoos, once stigmatised, are increasingly seen as a form of personal expression, and there shouldn't be a barrier to one's professional or social life.
If you are going for a job, for instance, we make up 90% of our minds about somebody within the first 3 seconds. And I have written a book on body language, and the face is just so important. You need to have the smile, you need to be able to read the facial expression, even when we're speaking. Now, if the face is really heavily tattooed, you can't do that.
Jade said that there is still this stigma, particularly to facial tattoos. We do judge people with tattoos, don't we?
We do. Unfortunately, we do, because it's not the norm. And as a human being, we tend to judge what is not the norm. And as Jade says, we are getting much more used to it. It is much more socially acceptable. But a lot of firms will say, if you've got a tattoo, you cover it. We don't want tattoos in the workplace.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the Truth. Available from the 19th of September at gbnews.com.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock. Peter Hitchens and Aaron Bastani remain alongside me. I can tell you there is very, very strong opinions coming through thick and fast in the email. Lots of support for Israel. Lots of people very angry at the conversation, very angry, pushing back, saying, will people stop attacking Israel for simply trying to defend herself? Children in Israel getting killed, no one seems to care. The flip side of that is, of course, children getting killed each and every single day in Gaza. Many would push back and say people don't seem to care about that either. Look, let's talk about something a bit different, shall we? Keir Starmer, he's now gained the nickname. He's only been in office about 5 minutes. He's been called Two-Tier Keir. He's now called Free Gear Keir. Why? Because it's come out now that he has accepted freebies. He's accepted more than any other party leader in recent times. His freebies have now topped £100,000. And I can tell you, they're broad spread. You've got clothes, which we've discussed at length. You've got football tickets, sports tickets, you name it, Taylor Swift. It goes on. What do you think to this, Aaron?
I think it's absolutely extraordinary. This is a man in his early 60s who's been earning 6 figures for a pretty long time. He was Director of Public Prosecutions on around £200,000 a year about a decade ago. Now, if you're earning £200,000 a year a decade ago, I struggle to understand why you need somebody else spending £2,485 on your glasses.
So your issue is not that he's accepting stuff. Your issue. So if this was a guy that had entered public office, let's just say he used to be a doctor, so he's not got this wealth that you think he might have. Would you not have an issue then with that leader taking all these freebies?
That's a great point. I would like to remain intellectually coherent and say that I would have the same criticism regardless of who it is, but I do think it really jolts, in particular with Keir Starmer, because he's had a very successful career, he's very wealthy, he's done extraordinarily well. He's a knight of the realm, and he's taking, like you say, freebies to go watch the football and to watch Taylor Swift. I think in a way, it doesn't just make him look silly and ridiculous. I genuinely think it's now getting to the point, £100,000 in tickets and gifts, where it diminishes his office. It makes the Prime Minister, which is meant to be the highest elected office in this land, it makes it look almost ridiculous,
Well,
cheap.
Peter's just chipped in and said second class. It makes
No,
it
it didn't say second class. It's second
right.
highest. The highest office in the land is the King, and don't let's forget it. What I think increasingly is that he perhaps is actually clueless. The most worrying thing that he said before the election in an interview was he was asked whether he had a favourite book or a favourite poem, and he answered no. He doesn't have either of those things. And I thought, what a really peculiar response. Maybe it's true. Maybe he doesn't actually have anything much in the way of an imagination. Maybe he is a sort of man without qualities who really doesn't have the sort of ideas about how to behave that most people are granted. And because this acceptance of these gifts is quite minor on the scale of human behaviour, but it's not gigantic Formula One type sleaze of the sort the Blair government was trapped in very soon after it came into office. But it's pretty ludicrous, and it's very easy to understand. Anybody can see he's being given clothes, he's being given glasses, and his wife is being given clothes and helped to buy them, and it's really, really, really odd. It must be damaging, and anybody who he had told about it among his circle of political advisors would have said to him, don't do this. Perhaps he didn't tell them, but didn't have the sense. It's really, really strange. That's the way it strikes me, and therefore, because it is strange and clueless, it has limitless possibilities to damage him personally as the leader of the Labour Party and as Prime Minister.
John's got in touch. He says, Michelle, I'm a serving police officer and I'm not even allowed to take a free cup of coffee from the gas station in case I get accused of showing them favouritism. He says, good. Bernard says, Michelle, why aren't you all just calling this what it is? These things are all bribes. What do you think Taylor Swift wants from Keir Starmer then? You'll have to enlighten me on that, Bernard. I would simply ask Keir Starmer this, if you're watching. Have you got no self-respect? Have you got no dignity? What kind of grown-up individual, a professional one, needs another person to pay for their spectacles, needs another person to buy their wife's clothes, take away every other aspect of everything? Where's your self-respect? Have a word with yourself. It's appalling. Anyway, look, I'll tell you what else is appalling. Paedophiles, I'll talk about them before the end of the programme. I want to see them chemically castrated, quite frankly, and also abortion centres. Do you support buffer zones surrounding them or not? I'll see you in 2.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. A lot of cloud to come in overnight tonight across eastern areas that will make for a fairly dull start to Thursday, with the best of any brighter weather across western areas. So we do have an easterly wind at the moment. That's because high pressure is sat over to the north and east of the UK, bringing in that easterly wind, and that's what's going to drag in the cloud overnight once again tonight. I think the cloud is going to be more extensive tonight compared to previous nights, and it'll probably linger a little longer into tomorrow morning. We could see some drizzly rain over any high ground as well, but with the strength of the breeze and fairly extensive cloud, it's going to be another mild night away from the clearer skies across the further north and west parts of Northern Ireland and Western Scotland in particular, seeing a very fine start to the day. And with a fairly brisk breeze across more southern areas, the clouds should start to break up quite quickly across more southern areas of England, but across more northeastern areas, parts of central England, it will linger through a lot of the morning, even across parts of eastern Scotland, Aberdeenshire in particular, seeing some fairly extensive cloud, possibly some sea fog as well first thing. And across eastern coasts of Scotland, northeastern England, it will probably stay quite cloudy through a lot of the day. A cloudier and cooler day here to come compared to today, but elsewhere that cloud should clear away quite nicely after lunchtime to leave another dry and fine day for many areas. But notice there'll still be a fairly brisk easterly breeze as well, particularly across the parts of the Channel coast. But despite the breeze, it's still going to be feeling pretty warm for September, temperatures climbing as high as 26 degrees. Another fairly dull start to come on Friday, and that's when we see a real switch in our weather, as once that cloud does clear, we could see some fairly heavy and thundery showers developing across a lot of England and Wales. And it's going to stay quite unsettled for more southern areas all the way through the weekend until Sunday. In fact, we could see some surface water issues by Sunday. Bye-bye.
the latest GB News travel.
Good evening, my name is Johnny Ratner. Problems in West Dunbartonshire to the east of Dumbarton. The A82 Stirling Road remains shut northbound off the Glasgow Road at the scene of an accident. And the M1 in South Yorkshire is down to a single lane northbound at junction 33. Everyone's been squeezed into the outside lane past the scene of a breakdown. A lorry's broken down at the Sheffield and Rotherham turnoff. On the M6 in Cheshire, 2 lanes closed southbound 17 to 16 near Crewe after a lorry caught fire. And heading out of London, the A13 partly blocked to the Prince Regent Lane underpass at Newham following an accident. Long queues back through the Limehouse Link tunnel, and north of Swansea, the M4 westbound partly blocked 46 to 47 at the Pembrokeshire interchange following an accident, and trains are suspended in Barton on Humber and Cleethorpes is all down to a 40 train. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7, Aaron Bastani and Peter Hitchens remain alongside me. Now, this one, I mean, we're going from emotional topic to emotional topic. This one I want to talk to you about is the matter of abortion, because buffer zones will come into force around abortion clinics in England and Wales from the end of October, the 31st, to be precise. Essentially, it makes it illegal to hand out anti-abortion leaflets or obstruct anyone's way. There's been lots of conversations about people silently praying in these buffer zones. Peter Hitchens, where are you on this?
Well, I think that it's certainly, there should be a freedom for people who are opposed to abortion to protest against where it takes place, provided their behaviour remains reasonable and considerate. I don't think anybody wants to see screaming mobs shouting baby killers at women going into abortion clinics. That would be uncivilised and disgraceful, but I think there's no reason for a free society to prevent people to stand quietly within a reasonable distance of an abortion clinic, offering support to those women who are going there if they want it from a different point of view. And I think there's a kind of, how shall I put it, a special status is given to abortion by the modern left. To them, it's kind of a good act which has to be defended. And they've forgotten that it has any disadvantages or any bad sides. And they've forgotten that there might be legitimate reasons to oppose it. And in fact, it's very interesting. Years ago, Hillary Clinton, who's a great supporter of abortion rights, used to say, what we want is for abortion to be safe, legal and rare. But the abortion campaign in the United States has now removed the word rare from that. They don't care about rare. They think abortion is a thing to be actively approved of, and they don't think it should be rare. And again, that's something I think a lot of us would disagree with, whatever side we took. It's not a pleasant thing when it happens. So yeah, I think that it's wrong for the law to take this stand against what are in general peaceful and discreet demonstrations. If it turns into something else, it's a different matter, but as long as it's peaceful and discreet, I really don't see why it should be banned.
Aaron?
So I'm going to disagree with Peter on this, I think, in a rather rare way. Personally, I think it's very important to uphold the right to free speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of protest, and I think if people want to protest around this issue, they're absolutely entitled and free to do that. But I think what makes this really unique is that it's women accessing healthcare. And I think that potentially being obstructed or being hectored or being protested at while seeking healthcare does seem beyond the pale.
But many people will be watching this pushing back, saying killing a child is not healthcare.
They would.
Well, what would they regard as the boundary there? Because in many instances, of course it is. Of course it is. There are many instances of abortion where it is undeniably healthcare.
Well, there aren't.
If you've got a history of ectopic pregnancy, of course there
aren't that many. Actually, it's not. That's.
Well, my mother had it. I mean, of course there.
It can happen, but it isn't.
So I mean, that would be my view on it. I mean, as somebody who supports the right to abortion, I don't think the law should be changed either way. I think the term limits where they are sensible. I mean, this is almost a small C conservative approach. I think the law as it stands. You know, some people don't like it. Most people think it's broadly agreeable. So I think that, look, I'm very wary on curtailing people's rights to protest, but I think 150-metre radius, I think that's sensible. I don't want to ban these people from making these points publicly. They're entitled to do that. I would like to see a constitutional right to freedom of speech. But I think when people are trying to access healthcare, I think it's an exceptional circumstance.
Do you know what I think this country should hang its head in shame over? You can legally have an abortion right up until the moment you're literally giving birth. If your child has got something like cleft palate, club foot, things like that, and I think that is so appalling. I think it is. I'm a mum that's spent too much time on a NICU ward with very premature babies, and I've seen these tiny, tiny little babies that have been born actually before the cut-off for the abortion. I've seen these are babies. They're not clumps of cells. They're babies. Don't ever be fooled. Killing a child until the second it's born because it's got a hole in its mouth, for example, it's so appalling. And if that parent killed that child seconds after it had exited that body, that parent, that mum, would be, hopefully, behind bars. And I think that is one of the great shames of our nation, and I think all politicians should be looking at that and should be urgently rectifying that. What do you think at home? You'll have strong opinions, and I'll tell you what else you'll have strong opinions on. The one after the break, goodness gracious me. Paedophiles, is it time to have mandatory jail sentences for these people? Also, I'd go a step further, actually, and I'd enforce mandatory chemical castration. Do you agree or not?
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Angela, what have we got?
Hello, there's an awful lot, but I think the main interesting thing is that Prince Harry said a week or so, 2 weeks ago, I think it was, that he absolutely wasn't going to go to his uncle's funeral because there wasn't enough protection for him. His uncle, Lord Fellows, was married to Jane Spencer, who was Diana's sister, who was the most practical and helpful of the three children, the three girls, and she's done an awful lot for Harry. I thought it was just terrible. He wasn't going to go there, but he has been there. They didn't talk to William. William didn't talk to him. Did he get any protection? Who knows? And if he didn't, if he takes the government to court yet again, they would say, well, look, we managed without that, but we don't know about that. But also the paper, the magazine that does loads for Harry and Meghan, they were the ones who said he wasn't going, so they said what he wanted them to say.
He doesn't need any protection. I mean, how did he get there? Probably in a Bombardier private jet that gives off 60 times more carbon than anybody else.
Yes, well, we don't know about that. The good thing was that he was there, and of course today is Remembrance Day for Diana, the day she died. So that he went there and he was with her side of the family, and I think that that's very good and might help him feel a bit better about things.
But neither of them are doing well out of it. William is not doing well out of it. Harry is not doing well out of it. The King is not doing well out of it. Meghan Markle's not doing well out of it. Why can't they just...
No, I don't think it's that easy. I think that they might do much worse if they were together again.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, Aaron Bastani, Peter Hitchens remain alongside me. Welcome back, everybody. The Sun newspaper did a very interesting investigation, which they published today, looking at some of the cases off the back, of course, of the Hugh Edwards one, which we've discussed to death now, but they use that as the hook into looking at how many paedophiles have basically gone to prison when they've been viewing child abuse imagery. Get this, less than 20% of those convicted of accessing this grotesque, disgusting, illegal content actually went to jail. Yes, you heard that right. Less than 20% of them, so that means 80-odd% there or thereabouts of paedophiles looking at child abuse images don't go to prison. I think that it should be mandatory, Aaron Bastani. If you look at this content, there should be no ifs, no buts, no maybes. Gone, prison. What do you think?
Well, they certainly shouldn't be free to carry on doing this disgusting behaviour. I suppose the counter-argument is it costs approximately £55,000 a year to have somebody incarcerated.
So what?
Well, no, but if all of these people are in prison, I suppose it's a question for you, it's a question for your audience.
I think...
Prison's a very expensive solution to...
Yeah, but I've got a fix for that. I would get rid... I would deport the foreign prisoners that are in our prisons. I would get them sent back to their countries of origin, so I'd save myself a few bob there. And I think if you ask most people, would you be happy to invest your tax money on getting paedophiles off the street and into prison? I think that actually is something that people would be more than happy to see their tax pounds go into.
Hundreds of millions, billions of pounds a year. I don't know. I mean, that's a question.
What price do people put on the well-being of a child? We've just been starting...
I agree entirely with you, but there are trade-offs in regards to how do you respond and what's the best value for money for the taxpayer. Sending them all to prison is quite an expensive solution.
Can I just make a broader point here? Anyone can do this. Sit in front of your computer, use a search engine and feed in the words spared jail. And you will just find an endless, unrolling spool of thousands and thousands and thousands of people who've done terrible things, some of them paedophiles, some of them violent persons, some of them thieves, some of them repeat offenders in all these things who are spared jail in the magistrates' courts and the Crown Courts of this country every day, all the time. Just look it up, spared jail. It comes up. There are so many of them, you'll get bored reading it. That is what our judges and magistrates do. They spare people jail because they've been instructed by the government not to send them there, and they don't, because the prisons are full. And the prisons are not full because our criminal justice system is so tough and fierce and sends lots of people to prison. Our prisons are full because you have to spend years and years and years getting into them, committing offence after offence after offence. First, you have to get the attention of the police at all. Then you have to go through the whole system of probation, fines you don't pay. Then you get a suspended sentence which is never activated, and then another one which isn't activated. And eventually, the criminal justice system finally loses patience and sends you to prison, by which time, what are you? A habitual recidivist criminal who will not be affected in any way by prison. The purpose of prison was always to frighten people out of committing crime. And to do that, it has to get you on the second offence. And until we reintroduce that procedure and stop waiting until people have become habitual criminals, our prisons will be too full. And the magistrates and the judges, whatever the Sun says and whatever Michelle says, doesn't matter what you say, can't be changed. No one can afford anything different the way we run things. It will be spared jail, spared jail, spared jail. Every other headline in your local paper, so-and-so spared jail. Just read them. Tomorrow morning, read your local paper or just read it online.
Yeah,
spared jail. That's what they all are. Spared jail.
People brought in mandatory jail sentences for things like killing an emergency service worker. Good, by the way. So these things can absolutely be brought in. The second thing I do, and I'm almost out of time.
They can't be implemented when brought in. That's the trouble.
The second thing I do, Aaron Bastani, is mandatory chemical castration of any convicted paedophile in the land. Would you agree with that?
Well, it'll certainly be cheaper than the prison option. You've got the data here from the NSPCC. And this is an extraordinary statistic, up to 500,000 men have viewed child sexual abuse images in the UK. Up to 500,000, which gets to my point about incarcerating. I'm not saying this lightly. That's a lot. Half a million people.
Let me tell you now, in Dewberry
half a million men.
In Dewberry World, right? If these 500,000 disgusting monsters, if you understood in this country that if you look at an image of a child being abused, you will be going to prison, and that 500 number will immediately come down, because if people genuinely thought, I better not look at this because, I don't know, Keir Starmer might be knocking on my door tomorrow, that would immediately reduce
but
that
Michelle,
volume.
none of this
wouldn't be that volume.
None of this will happen in the real world, just like your mass deportations, because it's not possible with the current system of government and law that we have. Unless you became some terrifying dictator with absolute powers, it won't happen. I don't think you're going to become that terrifying dictator.
There you go.
Wouldn't it also just be easier to block access to these images on the internet? I mean, that seems technically easier to me.
I want to just say to Andy, you said I'm a disgrace, saying that criticising people for being able to kill children with cleft palates, an awful impediment. I think you need to actually research, Andy, what a cleft palate is and how easily it can be fixed, my friend. Thank you, gents, for your contribution. Thank you to each and every one of you at home. I'll see you tomorrow night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. A lot of cloud to come in overnight tonight across eastern areas that will make for a fairly dull start to Thursday, with the best of any brighter weather across western areas. So we do have an easterly wind at the moment. That's because high pressure is sat over to the north and east of the UK, bringing in that easterly wind, and that's what's going to drag in the cloud overnight once again tonight. I think the cloud is going to be more extensive tonight compared to previous nights, and will probably linger a little longer into tomorrow morning. We could see some drizzly rain over any high ground as well, but with the strength of the breeze and fairly extensive cloud, it's going to be another mild night away from the clearer skies across the further north and west parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland in particular, seeing a very fine start to the day. And with a fairly brisk breeze across more southern areas, the clouds should start to break up quite quickly across more southern areas of England, but across more northeastern areas, parts of central England, it will linger through a lot of the morning, even across parts of eastern Scotland, Aberdeenshire in particular, seeing some fairly extensive cloud, possibly some sea fog as well first thing. And across eastern coasts of Scotland, northeastern England, it will probably stay quite cloudy through a lot of the day, and cloudier and cool